Welcome, everybody, for this week's edition of the Liberty First Foundation Roundtable. As has been kind of consistent here the last couple of weeks, I'm the only one here, and the other members of the panel will be joining me here in a little bit. But we try to get this started each week at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays. Oh, we got Frank. He just knocked on the door.
And here I am in glorious living color.
Well, welcome, Frank.
Oh,
I was just kind of introducing everybody to the show and welcoming them.
Well, good evening, friends and family, and anybody else who considers themselves awake, alive, and viewing. We're on a limited staff this evening. Jeremy is attending to his daughter's birthday. Mike Vasquez should be along with us momentarily.
He's running a little late.
Yeah, we got a couple other invites that I sent out for anybody who wanted to pop in and join us this evening. Just shoot the breeze a little bit. And if anybody watching wants to jump in on the conversation and avoid the chat room lag, let us know and we'll send you a link and you too can appear on camera.
So, did you see this week that a federal court basically said that the federal ban on unserialized firearms is unconstitutional?
Yes, I did, as it goes against the written text and tradition of the Second Amendment, as so beautifully detailed by Clarence Thomas, the wonderful Supreme Court justice. It's been a pretty decent week for Second Amendment.
Actually,
activities.
It's been a pretty decent few weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, the last few months has really worked well towards getting the Second Amendment the right notoriety that it deserves, and that it is no longer being thought of as a second-class right, but is actually one of our most important rights.
Well, it sure is a nice change from the 20 plus years that we've had of not even being allowed to have a case be heard, to where we're actually starting to see judges pick up the mantle now and say, hey, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, whoever, you kind of got to rethink things according to the new ruling from the Supreme Court. So, where everybody was complaining about activist judges who were ruling against the Constitution, looks like we finally got a couple activist judges that are ruling for the Constitution,
which is a very welcome change. I mean, if we really look at the history of the founding of this country, gun ownership was very paramount in the beginning. Okay, especially when we look at events like Lexington and Concord, which was the start of the revolution. Okay, and what was happening there? The British or the Crown was trying to seize firearms from the citizens. Well, the citizens said, no, you're not going to. And that is the history of why we have an inherent right to keep and bear arms. People don't want to recognize that as a part of our history. They want to say that Lexington and Concord were because of taxation. No. Lexington and Concord happened because British troops were trying to seize arms from the armories at Lexington and Concord and trying to withhold them from the citizens.
Well,
that was the whole purpose.
Well, the British knew at the time that the embers of freedom was starting to glow, and that it was only going to be a matter of time before enough people, enough of the colonists at the time were going to stand up and start demanding that the colonies be, free of the rule of tyranny. So the British, in their divine wisdom, said, "Well, the best way to stem off, to use the word of 2022, the incursion or the insurrection, would be to disarm the people." Well, we kind of know how that all worked out, but it also stands to reason why Second Amendment proponents are so steadfast in their belief of private ownership is that at the time of the revolution, we didn't have a standing army. We didn't have a the militia, quote unquote, was the people. There was no government agency that was issuing the firearms to the colonists who decided to sign up and fight for independence. These men came to the battlefield with their own gun. They came armed with what they hunted with. They came armed with what they defended their property and their lives with. They weren't issued any firearms, not like today's military, where they're issued issued your arms, you do your service, you give your gun back, and you go home. That wasn't the case. We brought our own stuff. And if in the event that we should ever have to be called to defend our nation again here at the home front, the military doesn't possess enough firearms to arm 150 million willing Americans who would, put their life and their sacred honor at risk to defend the country. They can't equip the American population. That's why the American population is armed, so that we can fend off an attack, that we can defend the homeland. And I don't understand why that is such a hard pill for anti-gun people to swallow. Yes, are there going to be bad things that happen? Absolutely. There's always going to be bad things that happen, and you can point to anything. You can point to anything that in any realm there's going to be bad things that happen. But you don't cut off the rights because somebody does something wrong. You don't punish somebody who didn't do something for what somebody who did do something. You don't do it.
Well, exactly. Okay. And we can look through our history beyond the revolution. Okay. We come up to the War of 1812. What won the War of 1812 wasn't the standing army, it was the militia. And the area I live in, we've got countless signs of militias standing up to the regular British Army. And that is what literally won the War of 1812 for us. The town I live in, or actually I live just north of, is Plattsburgh, New York. And if our watchers aren't familiar with the Battle of Plattsburgh, I do recommend that people look it up. It was actually a major sea engagement that was one of the turning points of the War of 1812. Okay, along with Battle of New Orleans. Happened very close timelines together. Battle of Plattsburgh happened on Lake Champlain, and it was a major naval engagement. But there was also a lot of land engagements that happened at that same time. And it was, like I said, one of the main turning points of the War of 1812. Go fast forward a little ways further. Okay, you've got the Spanish-American War. Again, what stopped the Spanish, a lot of that was armed civilians. It wasn't a standing army. We look at the Mexican War, the Battle of Alamo. Again, it was civilians that were on the front lines. It wasn't a standing army. Okay, these were militias.
And it's also funny that you bring up naval battles, because in the Revolutionary War as well as the War of 1812, the United States government, newly formed and then a couple decades into its formation, uh, our Navy wasn't exactly up to snuff.
No.
So, but you know what we did have? We had a hell of a merchant marine. We had
Mhm.
a lot of ships that were privately owned, privately captained, privately crewed, and the federal government at that time hired them to go out as what they called privateers. And they would go out into the oceans and they would capture or sink British vessels. They would prefer that they captured the British vessels because any British vessel that was captured was sailed back into harbor. It was reflagged, refitted, and it became part of the United States Navy. So it was worth more for us to capture their ships than it was to sink them. But I mean, we even sank ships during the War of 1812. We sank ships in England.
Hmm.
We had privateers that flew the flag of other nations, went all the way up and was wherever the English had their ships docked, set fire and sank to British ships. This
Yeah,
was
they sank him in
these
England, sank him in the Caribbean.
in the Caribbean, everywhere.
Yeah.
These were American citizens. These were regular citizens. That was their job. They were sailors. And to the for the most part, I mean, you could say that at one point they turned pirate because there was a lot of booty that was not, never returned back in. But hey, you know what? Call it the spoils of war. But again, these were people that were under contract. These were American citizens under contract from the United States. They stepped up and they fulfilled their duty, and they did what they did. It wasn't until after this that the relevance of the American Navy really became paramount, where we had to have a fleet that would make the Spanish Armada blush. You know,
Hmm.
we had our own vessels, so why would it stand to reason that you can't have private gun ownership because it's this or that? But we relied on private citizens to defend the nation out at sea, away from our borders, against a force that was coming in, and we had American citizens defending the homeland right here on our soil. It's always been the American people. And for those people who say, well, that's what the military's for, who the hell do you think the military is? The military is civilians who just sign a contract and
Yeah.
then they go to it. They're still Americans. They're still Americans. They just decided to wear a uniform rather than, use guerrilla warfare tactics. So, I mean, the whole notion that the Second Amendment is only about a militia. It's only about this. It's not about you don't have the right to this. You don't have the right to that. These people don't have a grasp of history. They don't have a grasp of the reality of the situation. It's like, why in some states are you only allowed to carry 10 rounds of ammunition in your firearm, but the cop who shows up at the scene that you called him to because you needed help, he shows up with 5 extra magazines, an AR in the trunk, a shotgun in the trunk. He's showing up with all the firearms necessary after the event is over. When you were already there when the event took place, you needed those weapons, and that means defense at the moment, not 45 minutes later. You needed it then. So you are your own first responder. We are our country defenders. The Second Amendment is about the citizenry, not about the militia, not about the military.
Well, and that's very true, Frank. Agent Black says the military are trained, paid, and disciplined as civilians.
What's up, Agent? How you doing today?
Okay, welcome, Agent Black. Agent Black has been in our chat multiple times since we started this. He came over with Mike Vasquez. He's a fan of Mike Vasquez, and he contributes some very interesting points to our conversations when we have these discussions. So we do
Yes.
appreciate Agent Black, and we do appreciate his input. Um, very true. Military are trained, paid, and disciplined civilians. But I want to bring up a point that Frank was starting to allude to. Okay, and I don't think that he really realized what he was alluding to. The modern militia today, or what would be classified as militia, is not only just every man, woman, and child, okay, as was defined in countless states at the founding period. But today, they've kind of changed the definition of the militia. And if we really want to look at it, our militia is our National Guard, which guess what? They're civilians until they put that uniform on twice a month and do their 2 weeks of training every summer. You have law enforcement, our militia. People may not want to recognize them as that, but they are. Okay. These are the people that are on the front lines. Well, guess what? It's not enough. Okay. We found out during World War II when Japan tried to invade the Aleutians. It wasn't the United States Navy or the United States Army that stopped them. It was the Eskimo. It was the native Alaskans that stopped the Japanese from being able to invade the Aleutians. It was armed civilians. Okay. In Afghanistan, when Russia tried to invade Afghanistan, it wasn't a standing army that stopped the Russians from invading Afghanistan. It was Afghani civilians. Okay. One of the reasons why we had such a hard time in Vietnam, Afghanistan, even in Korea, it wasn't because of the standing armies. It was the civilians. We saw that in Iraq. We've seen that in Vietnam. Like I said, Vietnam. We saw it in Afghanistan. We saw it in Korea. Everywhere there is, when professional armies go together, yeah, it's whoever has the most might. But when you add a civilian component into it, the rules change. The dichotomy of warfare changes. The French resistance against the Germans is part of the component that defeated the Germans. The French resistance was civilians. Okay. The biggest headache and one of the biggest things that really turned the tide during World War II against Nazi Germany wasn't the American army. It wasn't the English. It was the civilians. It was the resistance forces in Poland, in France, and everywhere else. Okay. Today, we are witnessing it again. This is on the global stage. The war in Ukraine. Russia invaded. The first thing the Ukraine did was ask for arms to arm their civilians. The reason why Russia's having such a hard time in Ukraine is because the civilians are armed.
And it was civilians that were disarmed by their government
that allowed Russia to get a foothold.
Yeah. And as far as we can get into the Ukraine, we know that that's going to be a ridiculously complicated set of circumstances there. I think the Ukraine is, other than BLM, is probably America's most prevalent source of money laundering. I think it's the
yeah, but I wasn't really getting into that. Okay,
yeah, I know. We're using it as an example. Look, no matter how corrupt something is, when somebody's aiming a gun at you, you got to react to it the best way you can. And the only way that, no matter how corrupt or not corrupt Zelensky and his people are, the only thing that's going to stop him from getting, hoisted up onto a yardarm is if the civilian population manages to repel the Russians so that it doesn't make it worth their while anymore to keep trying to go after them. So I mean, and the civilians over there, look, it doesn't matter to them how corrupt their government is, not when it's their wives and children and parents that are getting shot in the street. They're going to have to fight back. Anybody is going to have to fight back. I do not ever hold a grudge against somebody who defends themselves for whatever reason. Look, this is going to sound stupid, but for crying out loud, your local drug dealer's got the right to defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got the right to defend themselves, and I do not begrudge anybody for doing so with whatever means they have at their disposal. And when you take away somebody's means of doing it, and now you have to rely on them to, get off their asses and go pick a fight, so to speak, or at least respond to one, you better be able to arm those people up. Now, what happened to the arms and armament that the Ukrainian government took from all its civilians from all those years ago? Who the hell knows? But we had to equip all of them. And yes, George Takai, the AR-15 was dispersed for those citizens so they could repel a foreign army. That's why we own them here. I don't know.
Kind of the point.
Yeah, I don't know if the transporter scrambled something in your brain or something like that. But yeah, you kind of made the point for us, and so, oh my, well, I'll give you one of them. So think about that for a minute. But it's
and I want to also, while we're kind of on the subject, okay, because history can be a teacher for us, and it also shows.
It should be a teacher.
Well, it is, and history is also showing what happens when a populace is unarmed and forbidden to have arms. And we can look right here in our own country at what's happened. Okay. And we have the internment camps during World War II where the Japanese civilians weren't allowed to own arms, and their arms were basically taken away from them, and they were interned by the hundreds of thousands. Okay. We've got Black Wall Street, where because of black laws, blacks were not allowed to own firearms. Okay. Even honorably discharged military veterans, because of the color of their skin, were forbidden to own arms. And then we have atrocities like the state police firebombing Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. Okay. We have events, things like Kent State, where there was a peaceful protest. And the National Guard showed up. I mean, come on. This was an unarmed populace protesting for what they believed in. And our government shot and killed them.
Well, don't blame government, Michael. You know that government is only here to help.
Oh, yeah. Of course they are.
Yeah, government.
Of course they are. Which I want to segue off of that. Okay, because we do have a lot of people pushing really hard for the expansion of our government.
For crying out loud.
And this year we saw, Michael, you know probably the numbers on this because I can't remember for sure. How many new IRS agents were added to the federal government?
87,000.
Yeah, 87,000. And they are going to be armed.
Now, I just want to take a moment and discuss what really happens when we expand our government. Okay, what happens to our economy when we expand our government? Okay, the average pay for an IRS agent is $62,253 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's the start. Yeah.
That's the average, okay? And we know that there's some IRS people, the directors and so forth of the IRS that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Well,
and
there's
we have some that are well below that.
well, no, there's these guys they are hiring. There's about 10 to 15% of them. So about 10,000 are going to be armed individuals, which means they're getting hazard pay, which means you're looking at them getting somewhere closer to 75, 80,000 a year.
Okay, Agent Black says 87K. Oh, 87,000 new agents. Okay, so that's just, we aren't even getting into the EPA and all this other climate change czar stuff. This is just the IRS.
Mhm.
They've added 87,000 new agents. Now, I'm going to actually round this number down from 62,000. And I'm going to use 50,000 as our metric just to demonstrate what happens when we add a bunch of new federal employees. Okay. At 50,000, tax rate's roughly about 20%. Okay. Just for ease of math.
Mhm.
Okay. 20% of 50,000 a year is going to work out to about $10,000 a year that each one of those agents are paying in taxes.
Right.
$10,000 times 87,000 puts us at what? $8.7 million?
Roughly.
That's $8.7 million that has effectively been removed from our economy.
That's one part of it. The bigger part I would be worried about is the fact that just rounding some numbers, just make it really, really simple. 87,000 agents getting $10,000 a year. Let's call it 8.7 million. That's not accurate at all.
No.
That's debt spending, which is going to reduce the actual value of the American dollar around the world for every single American. That's hitting 350 million Americans.
No,
That's
I'm not talking about the actual payroll. I'm
Okay.
just talking the taxes that these agents have to pay each year to the federal government, which in turn gets paid right back to them.
No, I
You have effectively removed $8.7 million out of our economy. It no longer exists because all it does is go from the IRS agent to the government, from the government back to the IRS agent, from the IRS agent back to the government until those agents are no longer employed.
No, I get that. But I think, and even I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I'm saying there's another impact that no one talks about, which is that every single American's dollar is going to be reduced. The value of buying, your buying power, is going to reduce. Inflation is going to increase for every single one of those agents we don't need that are going to go into your PayPal, your everything, your credit cards, everything that you get money on. And they're going to tap into all of that. And they're going to be taking more of your money as your money is reducing and the cost of everything you buy is increasing. This is the problem whenever we grow the size of business, of government. It's always hitting American people three different ways.
But my big point was, like I said, okay, the amount of money that's actually being removed out of our economy. Okay. I'm not talking about the inflation because we know that's happening with the payroll, the increased salaries that are being paid. Okay. But beyond that, beyond the inflation, we've also effectively removed, just in this instance, $8.7 million out of the economy. It no longer exists because all it does is plays ping pong back and forth. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the new climate change czars and everything else that's being added, the new climate police, that's being added in the DOJ and so forth.
Mhm.
We're talking billions of dollars that are effectively removed. Not inflation, effectively billions of dollars that essentially vanish out of our economy.
Mhm. Yeah. It's no one thinks about what happens when we grow the economy. Excuse me, when we're growing government and its impact on the economy. No one ever talks about that. They just
Yeah.
because everyone
And,
looks at the
and I
headlines
have
and
yet,
not the
like I said,
details.
everybody talks about the inflation impact. I have yet to hear anybody ever talk about the money that disappears when new federal employees are added.
I'll tell you.
And speaking about something nobody talks about,
Yeah.
by the way, real quick, if you happen to think that you're one of those people who's going to record our show and then reproduce it on your own show and sit there thinking that you're going to use all little snippets and you're going to do this and that for your own benefit, well, listen, I know that the 1 or 2 viewers that you have are probably going to find us very entertaining and informative, but we'd rather have them come over here and watch us than come over there and watch you regurgitate your crap about us. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, do me a favor, grow a set, fertilize them, water them, put them in the sun so they get nice and big, and join us.
Yeah.
Join us for the conversation rather than trying to hijack
We'd
that and using
love
our
to have you on the show.
intellectual property. So yeah, just before we forgot about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll also see the disclaimer over there that says you can't reproduce or rebroadcast without our permission.
Yeah. Just to let people know, we happen to find an individual because we check from time to time individually the different channels and everything that we do. We check on who's making comments or making like the Young Turks when they attacked us one time. We pay attention to what people are doing. And it just so happened that we found an individual who copied word for word, second for second, the entire show. That's a crime. And we don't allow that, and we pay attention, and we will take actions when necessary to do that. It's one thing to comment about a comment, you see that on various programs. That's one thing. And again, we'd say if you dispute something we have to say, come on in. We're happy to hear your voice. But the whole
And-
next thing to break a
And
law.
there is another thing. Okay. There is such thing as fair use.
Yeah. And
And
that's what
fair
it is.
use is when you either want to satirize what we're talking about, what if you want to go for it, or if you want to use something in our conversations to make a point, to either
Educate.
educate or whatever. Okay. But to flat out use our unedited full broadcast, okay, that is a violation of copyright law. Okay. This is our intellectual property. We take the time to do the research, etc. And if you want to do that, then you're going to actually force us into a position where we have to defend ourselves.
So we just wanted to hit on that because we did pay attention. We did find you. But to go on what we were talking about, and Agent Black was mentioning, but the U.S. debt is $31 trillion. Does any of this make any, does it matter? The economy is in a recession, whether they change the definition or not. We have problems around the world. Yeah, it still does matter because the more that they're spending, the more that they're wasting our money and depleting the value of our money, the deeper and longer the recession goes, not just for the United States, but the rest of the world, because we are one of the biggest buyers in the world. We're a service economy. So this hits everyone's pocketbook, not just American citizens. It's hitting everyone. And that means it's going to be a deeper recession with higher inflation that's going to last longer, with more people losing their jobs and their homes, and mortgage failures, and it's widespread. So this is a big deal. And
Oh, it's a huge deal.
but a
And
lot of
then when you add into it, the United States has the largest government in the world.
Mhm.
Okay, nobody else comes close.
we don't need this
So
big government.
You know,
if
I'll give you a quick example of what I'm kind of looking for a new car right now,
Mhm.
and I've been bouncing around a whole bunch of different ideas and trying to find something. I don't want to spend a shit ton of money on it because I'm going to beat it up a little bit. So I'm going to find something I fit in that's going to be durable, get me where I got to go. It's got to be able to tow. It's got to go off road, carry all my gear back and forth to the range and everything. And I'm looking at all the new cars. And if a good friend of mine says to me, he said, why are you looking at new cars? Why don't you just wait a couple of months? And I says, for what? He says, the repos. The repos are going to be coming in fast, and they're going to be coming in hot, and they're going to be coming in with low mileage on them, and all the depreciation is already going to be off them. Because the way the economy is going right now, you got a lot of people are going to be losing jobs and not being able to afford that $600-700 a month car payment that's been sitting over their head, and you'll be able to pick up a car for half of their payment with 10,000 miles on it. And to an extent, he was right, because I'm looking at the car lots and they're empty. The car lots are empty. The very few new cars are on the lot. There's still a chip shortage that we're dealing with. That part of the supply chain hasn't been fulfilled yet. But I noticed something else in the trend with the used car departments is used to be able to go to a car dealership and somebody would stand outside with the paintbrush or the magic marker and write the price of the car on the windshield.
Mhm.
Hey,
Yeah,
this
the paint
car
job.
is X amount of dollars, this amount of dollars. They're not doing that anymore. They're not putting the price of the car in the windows because the used car market is inflated by 47%
Yep.
because of the price of the new cars being skyrocketed. And then they also don't put the price on it because of another reason. If I come in and I can afford to buy a car cash, I'm probably going to pay one price. If I'm going to come in and finance the car, I'm probably going to pay a different one. And since they don't put the price on the car, you don't know what the dealer is going to tell who. The one dealer might say that car is $30,000, and the next guy comes in, oh, that's $35,000. If it's not in writing, you got nothing to guarantee on anything on. And the way you can look a lot at how things are happening now, in the car market, in the housing market, building materials just started dropping a little bit for a short period of time, but now the housing market is taking a nosedive. 6 months ago, I was watching realtors come around my neighborhood, put a for sale sign in the ground at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and a sold sailed on it at 12:01. Houses were going before they were even listed. Now I'm seeing price reduced, price reduced, price reduced. There's something bad happening in this economy, and it has a direct correlation with inflation and the growth of government, because both of those things are reducing the power of the dollar. And you have foreign countries saying that they want to take the US dollar off as their standard. And all of this talk about cryptocurrencies and electronic currencies and going with this and going with that. There's bad times coming. And my advice to everybody, if you can do it, stock up on your food, stock up on your brass, stock up on your lead, because those are the things you're going to be looking at having to have in the new economy.
Guys, I've actually been telling people exactly what you just said, Frank. Literally, I've been telling people to stock up in food and prepare since January this year. Since January, this stuff has been obvious. Everyone in the world is aware that we are in a recession and it's going to be deep and long. We already know that Europe is targeting 18% by the end of this year. That's 2 months away. We already know there's a world food shortage that's affecting Ghana and the rest of Africa and South America already happening. And we haven't hit the peak of a 40% food shortage. America is a service economy, and China has already slowed down their production. We already see that happening. And when we look at what's happening with OPEC and what happened there, Saudi Arabia smacked Biden in the face. They said, oh, we'll increase production for 100,000 barrels for 1 month, came back, cut production by 2 million barrels. And when Biden had the balls to try and look good for the election, Saudi Arabia came out and said, oh, by the way, you asked us, you're playing politics. And they admitted, yeah, you came here, you begged us to wait until after the election to do everything we were going to do anyway, because you were afraid of losing votes for Democrats. This is why we're in such a bad situation, and why everyone saw this coming. All the financial institutions knew this for a year. It's because we're watching our government, the current structure of it, the leadership in place right now, they're playing election games. They're playing who can get the most votes. That's all they're concerned about, is maintaining control and power. And they're not looking at, and here's the consequence of trying to push back the Fed from increasing rates that should have started last summer. Here's the consequence of not telling people, here's a plan for the food shortage that they announced in February and have yet to come up with a plan with. This is what happens when you're playing games with OPEC and saying, hey, just do us a favor, screw over the American people after the election when they can't have consequences to our power anymore.
Well, you have to look at it this way also. You say, well, why would all these powers that be in such a rush to look to collapse our economies and everything? And I think back to the Rockefeller era, when they broke up Rockefeller. He came back. They broke his company up into 4 companies, but he still had majority interest in all of them. Mm-hmm. Everybody said, oh, well, this is going to break up. No, he just regrew the 4 companies bigger than the original one and was worth 4 times as much. Mm-hmm. If you have $10,000 and that's your life savings, and somebody comes along and says, well, the economy is going to crash and you're going to lose 75% of your net worth. Now you're worth $2,500. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. But if you got $10 billion and somebody says the economy is going to crash and you're going to lose 75% of your net worth, you still got $2.5 billion. You still have enough resources to weather whatever storm it throws at you. And while everybody else loses everything they have, you're still in a position to start buying up all the things that everybody else lost. So as the economy starts crashing, the people who caused the crash are the people who wind up benefiting most from it, because they still have enough to withstand the storm, pick up the pieces, plant everything new, and start all over again. And by the time everything comes back, they're worth 5 times as much as they were before the crash. While you and I are all going to be sitting there trying to figure out whether or not we can keep the lights on.
No, I understand, but there's another component to this, because it's not just about the money, which is a big deal. And we're going to see some of the powers grabbing everything at fire sale prices, like we saw in 2008, like we saw in 2001, right after the stock market crashed, then after we saw the techno bubble back in 2000. Here's the thing that a lot of people aren't looking at is when we see everyone go, as an example, the 401ks, everyone's 401ks are being readjusted right now. I used to be a stockbroker. I remember what happens when we get to 5. They're now saying it's going to be 5, maybe 6% in interest rates, which means stocks aren't going to be worth it anymore. People are going to buy bonds. What does that mean to the average person? Your portfolio is going to lose money as they switch. They're going to sell stocks, buy bonds. That's your 401k. You're going to lose money on the short term. People are going to panic. This recession is going to cause people to lose jobs in their homes. People are going to panic. And when they panic, they turn to the government more often than not, and they're going to say, do something. which is the term I always hate, and it's the worst thing you could possibly say. And they're going to say, do something. And the government inevitably every time says, okay. And they're going to put up something like the American Inflation Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, things that are going to increase inflation, making the problem worse, but also taking away your rights and your freedoms, kind of like with the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, that didn't make anyone safer. It put a dollar sign on your rights to take away your Second Amendment rights, paid for by your taxes. You lost your right to due process, and the government's paying your state government and your local politicians to take it away from you because you said, do something. And they said, yeah, this sounds like it's safety. It sounds like we're protecting you. And in fact, no, they're making you dependent and they're taking away your freedom and your choice. And you have nowhere else to turn because you're desperate and going, I don't know what to do. Instead of saying, hang on, the government doesn't have a plan to deal with the food shortage. I'm going to raise chickens. I'm going to grow a backyard vegetable, just some vegetables in my backyard. I'm going to go and talk to my neighbor about fixing my plumbing or doing my roof. I'm going to, I don't know. There's 1,000 things. You're going to talk to your local mechanic about fixing your used car rather than buying a new car. There's a lot of things we can do and we used to do 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And the kids today, because they've been programmed to just obey, the only thing they know to say is, government, help me. I'll do whatever you say. That's the biggest danger long term. Short term, it's about money. Long term, we're losing power and freedom and rights. And no one is telling anyone, here's the consequence. And that, I think, is probably the biggest problem. I mean, you agree? Think I'm wrong?
No, you're 100% right. And
Well, I'm going to make some caveats.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm opening up a few links here.
I'm going to make some espresso. Maybe not.
Well, folks,
I think we are rapidly moving towards, and one of the leading indicators of this is what we see going on across the world, not just here in the United States, but we're seeing across the world. I think we are rapidly moving into a social economy. Okay. Right here, I will bring this up. This is in the EU.
Goddamn, we find this today.
Social economy in the EU. Okay, essentially where we no longer use cash, we use social markers.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of cash.
Yeah, and the social credit rating.
Okay, so this is the European Commission.
The social credit rating. Social credit is going to suck because people hate me. I'm gonna have no credit whatsoever.
And well, the example is China. They're modeling everything after China, and in China, if the Chinese government doesn't like what you've said or what you've done, you can't buy eggs, you can't buy meat, you can't do anything. And basically, this is their way to say, okay, if you want to survive, you have to obey.
This is from the Davos Commission in 2022, the World Economic Forum. 5 ways governments can unlock a more social economy. Okay. And one of the lead things has been that they are using to promote this is COVID.
Of course.
Okay. Let's bring up our next one. Okay. Now, I used to think that this was just maybe a few areas that we were seeing this, but I've already brought up the European Union, Just brought up the World Economic Forum. Now we're going to bring up JSTOR.
By the way, Agent Black, I know you're in the UK and love to see you with us. I know it's early in the morning for you, but consent is not required.
No, you give consent in so many ways these days that you don't even realize that you're giving the consent.
No, you
I mean,
don't.
every single
And
time you download an app, there's a 7,500 word piece of literature that every one of us just winds up scrolling through and agrees to the terms of service, so we could use the app for free or limited commercial availability, and you have no idea what you're giving away every time that you click one of those things.
True.
so here's JSTOR review of social economy. Okay, I mean, social economies are showing up everywhere.
Because it's
Okay.
effective.
We have and we've discussed this on the show, the huge discussions about equity. As long as currencies are being used for the purchase of goods and services, there can never be quote unquote equity. Never. Will never happen.
No,
It
you can
won't
have
be
it.
until you start using a social economy that is completely controlled by some ruling class that you can ever have quote unquote equity. And even then, you have false equity. There is never true equity because the ruling class will not be equal with the people.
Well, Mike, equity and equality are absolutely opposing ideas.
They are.
Equity prioritizes a specific group based on an elite group assigning values to different categories. It means that everyone is categorized. You're no longer individual. You're only a category, and you're only as worth as much as that category on any given day. Used to be gays, now it's transgender. Used to be being black, now it's being a woman. That's equity. And we are trying in the United States and also in the UK, as well as several other countries, we're trying to impose that equity. And the only thing that's holding it back is the fact that we have largely democratic society where they can't authoritarianly impose these categories universally. We have people who are going to fight against that.
Well, and here's the thing.
And we don't mean physically.
We just saw, but we have governments that are working to take that away from us.
Yes.
We just saw this week, California instituted legislation this week where doctors cannot disagree with politicians.
Well, that's not new. I mean, think about New York State. They fired 34,000 doctors and nurses for disagreeing with the state.
Yeah, this is natural law where they can actually receive punishments.
But they've been moving towards that direction for a while. I mean, the thing is, as much as COVID gave various state governments and the federal government the opportunity to impose more authoritarian control because people were afraid, it also showed more transparently this is about power, this is about who's in control, and it's not you, the average citizen. You're just a category, and you're only worth what they think they can get from that category in terms of votes, in terms of maintaining power, in terms of forcing other people who are either silent or in opposition to stay silent. That's the big thing about social media.
Well,
to use go ahead.
And now it's even made worse because you have government entities are now partnering with the private sector in order to better control the populace at large. We saw what happened with the thermostats not that long ago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now you're starting to see with all the technology that we've embraced in this world, where companies literally have the ability to shut off something that you bought without your consent in doing so. And all they have to do is work with the government to figure out whose shit they want to shut down. And you already saw it happen with Facebook working with the FBI to figure out what information they were going to shut down, what accounts they were going to suspend, what speech they were going to stifle. And it's all based on what opinion you have. Whatever the opinion you have, whether it's pro or for, is going to be judged by a certain set of criteria that the government is going to set out, and they're going to use the private sector, private companies, to enforce those things on people, whether or not they want to or not. Because the government understands, well, the private sector can operate within its own certain rules and regulations that the federal government cannot. So when the federal government says we can't do this directly, now they figured out a way how to do it indirectly. And they started off with small things, and the small things are freedom of speech, then being able to control your thermostat, being able to control your security cameras, being able to control your Alexa device, being able to control all the rest of this stuff. And now you're starting to see it even more because the private sector took a note from the federal government. And I say this because being that I'm looking for a new car, or one that I've been thinking about anyway, you'll notice that when you buy a car, you have certain options that you buy, certain packages that you buy. I want heated seats, air conditioned seats, a heated steering wheel. I want satellite radio. I want this. I want that. The satellite radio was the only thing, that and OnStar or roadside assistance services were the only things within the last 10 years that was subscription based. Now, if you want your heated seats to continue to operate, well, that's a monthly fee that you're paying. If you want your defroster to continue to work, or your sunroof to open, or your little wiper blades on your headlights, all of those things are now coming under subscription services because the private sector learned that they can control your car if you don't obey their rule. And the rule is pay me. Well, what happens when the rule is no longer about the money, but about what you say and what you think or where you go? And they can now shut down the thing that you bought because you don't comply with what they said, because the government said so.
Well, that's the social economy.
Well, actually, we have the reality of that. The example came up this week. It's PayPal. It's the Disinformation Governance Board, which has now become privatized. And we saw it with the example of PayPal this week when they said, if you have misinformation, which they don't define, which means you say something they don't like or the government doesn't like, and through PayPal's actions, they will fine you $2,500.
Right.
And of course, they came out when the backlash hit because people said you can't do that because of violating the First Amendment, because you have no business in my private life. And then they said, oh, well, it was a typo. No, it's a multi-million-dollar company with lawyers that the language had to go through. This is memos and conversations in multiple departments of the company that it had to go through, several webmasters that it had to go through so that it could be put into their system. This was a corporate decision that was approved of, and the only reason why they backed off is because the public had a backlash, which I truly believe the government was trying to take a thermometer check, a temperature check to see, okay, how far can we go before the public's going to push back at this moment so that they have another way to go? Because we have all of the social media giants, internet overlords are out there saying, we have disinformation boards. You can't say this, that, or the other. We're not defining any of this. We're just telling you there are things you can't say, and we will punish you for that. Now it's in the private sector, and it's working perfectly in line with the government. The example being New York's gun laws that say you have to give New York State 3 years of your social media content, your private conversations, to the government to approve of your character so that they get to decide. That's right in line with this misinformation. They're blocking you on the social media side, they're blocking you on the government side, they are punishing you for mentioning unapproved thoughts at every side. And they're telling you, if you speak out, not only is the government, not only is it private business, but because your friends and families and these independents who are silent, they're afraid of the backlash. You're getting it from the public too. This is the way that you set up an authoritarian government. It's a perfect scenario. It's really, truly terrifying.
And you saw what they did to Kanye West.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Chase Manhattan Bank told Kanye West, you have 10 days to move all your funds out of our account. We don't want to do business with you because of your personal views. And then Twitter shut him down, Instagram shut him down, and a couple of other places all shut him down too, because he wore a White Lives Matter shirt.
Yeah. And they said that, and that's now defined as racism. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Why? Because the old rule is take the one word that you think is racist, substitute any other group or organization, and input their name in that place. Is it still racist? Obviously, if we take out white lives matters and take out the white, put in black, and we know that's not considered racist. If we take out the word black and put in all, some people consider that racist. If we took out the word white and put in Jews lives matters, would that be racist? Would it be anti-Semitic to fight against that? Obviously, the answer is in example after example that we could use there. Every other example says it's racist to fight this, to denounce this. And it's in life affirming to have that statement. Then why is it bad for anyone to have white lives matters? They're pointing on Kanye because, and I had this conversation with a few people before, they're saying because Kanye is able to influence people. No, he's just it's Kanye's meaningless. He's an entertainer. Who cares? The only thing that matters is it's visibility. It's visibly saying, I don't believe in the disinformation, and it's an unapproved message because it doesn't lead to more control. That's why they're upset. It's not because of Kanye. It's because this is opposition to their control, and that's why they're hitting him so hard. And we should all take notice, everyone watching this, and realize this is about unapproved message. Having the First Amendment, having your First Amendment right to speak is under attack. They are trying to chill your voice so that you cannot say anything that does not lead to more power for a small group of elites. And in example after example, that is exactly what we are seeing. At least that's the way.
And then we have,
and you're seeing how when you do toe the line, you are rewarded handsomely, because they'll adjust the algorithms of whatever it is that you discuss on social media so that your content gets approved, your content goes to the top of the line, your content gets the most amount of views, you get spoon-fed to the people, and then people like that have the opposing point of view that may have actually thought some shit out logically. Nope, sorry, we're going to suppress you. We're going to block your channel. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So if you want to make it in this, world, take the 10 Commandments and do the exact opposite of everything that's in the 10 Commandments. If you want to make it in this world, prostitute yourself, your family, do whatever it takes to make yourself as risque and without any moral turpitude, without it would just be the most disgusting type of person you could possibly imagine being, and you'll be driving around in a Ferrari and have a house on the beach. Because if you stand for anything in this world that's traditional, conservative, or common sense, or that requires you to question authority, shut up.
And the thing is, as people do not understand, right now, there's a lot on the left that are cheering a lot of what's going on right now.
Oh yeah.
Okay, a
There's
lot on the left that are cheering. It only takes an election.
A fair election.
In America. But and that says a lot because we lead the rest of the world. I mean, the more that we have failed, the more we've seen the entire world get destabilized.
But here's my point.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's stick with my point.
Yeah.
Okay. It only takes an election.
Mm-hmm.
And the very thing that the left is doing will come back and bite them.
Yeah, but they won't see it as that because they're going to be told, well, we were always, I mean, look at now. We did all the right things. You just don't understand. How many times have they told us we just don't
But we
understand?
hear that constantly, regardless of party. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay. And people are ignorant of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is what I'm really getting at is people are ignorant of this because they push and push and push to silence the opposite crowd. And they don't understand when the opposite side is in power, the same thing's going to come back and bite them in the ass.
Yeah, we've seen that with the nuclear option, meaning the filibuster. Both sides have used that as a threat against each other. We've seen them use tweeting back
And
forth.
today you're silencing conservative voices. Okay. It doesn't, all it takes is a change of a board of directors of any of these social media companies to more conservative social board of directors. And guess what? Now it's your voice being silenced, not the conservative voice.
Well, at least the one thing that we can say about us is that we have never silenced anybody who criticizes us. Matter of fact, we invite them to come in and join us. And we'll listen, if you don't like the format of, okay, there's 3 against 1 or 4 against 1 or whatever, Mr. Marshall right here, he'll be happy to take on anybody one-on-one. Mr. Vasquez right there, be happy to take anybody on one-on-one. Me, so will I, but I'm going to curse at you a lot more than these two guys will. But we will let your voice be heard because we don't look at ourselves as having the option or the right to not let your voice be heard. We want your voice to be heard because we believe in the power of the voice, that the power of persuasion and the proper argument is what wins or loses the vote. Mm-hmm. So if you have a credible argument, you see, that's why, like, I can't stand wishy-washy leftists because they go with whatever the flow is. But a guy like Bernie Sanders has been singing the same tune for his whole life. I
respect for Bernie because he does stand on his beliefs.
He's a bit of a hypocrite with his 3 houses and, well, the millionaires and billionaires used to have to pay their fair share. Now it's only billionaires because Bernie's a millionaire now 10 times over. So now it's just a billionaire. The billionaire's got to pay his fair share. But I respect him enough to say he's been consistent with his argument. But if you can't be consistent with your argument, don't criticize those of us who are. If you are going to be consistent with your argument and you think your point of view is more valid or more prescient than ours, join us. Debate with us. 1-on-1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't care. Come in, wear your wig, your tutu, your eyeliner, whatever the hell you want. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. Come in and debate with us. We're never going to shut you off. We're never going to shut you down. We're never going to shout you into a position of you being quiet. We want that open exchange. And Michael's right. They're going to complain when the right shuts them down, the way the right shuts. But I don't think you're going to see the right shutting down the left nearly to the same degree that you do the other way around.
Usually that isn't what happens. Usually what happens is the right, because we've had this play out before with we had radio back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was about talk radio. And the left was saying it was dominated. Talk radio, 70s, 80s, 90s, dominated by the right. So the left said, that's unfair. It's an unfair advantage. We're being silenced. So that's why they made the equal airtime. It was a federal requirement. The left got by law instituted that you had to have balanced time. So if you gave an hour to the right, you have to give an hour to the left. They got that. The right did not complain about this, and the left still lost. And now they're saying, well, now we have to do cancel culture because they can't compete.
Yeah,
that's normally what happens.
They couldn't compete in an open arena and let the private sector dictate, let the market dictate. And if you remember correctly, it was Air America.
Yep.
That was Al Gore's pet project.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that wind up? That Air America turned into Al Jazeera Network.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wound up selling it off to them. It was the only way that he could reap his reward and go buy his multi-million-dollar mansion built on the sand that he says is going to get washed out by the water next week, but he lives there now. Don't get me started. But it was the fairness doctrine. It's always been a manner of trying to say, okay, well, we have to make it equal. If you can't compete, you can't compete. And you have to let the free market decide. Now we're seeing it play out in the sports because, well, if the guy can't win, he's placed number 475th as the best swimmer in the nation. He can't compete. Well, how do we make it fair? Let him cut his schmeckle off and go put on a bikini and swim against.
Well, he doesn't even have to cut his schmeckle off.
No, he's just got to say, well, I don't recognize that anymore.
Yes,
I'm gonna do the twist and tuck and roll or whatever the hell they do, and he's going to jump in the pool and be number one. They don't have. That's the new fairness doctrine, is to take from someone else what you can't achieve on your own, and then we'll call it fairness. It's all bullshit. But like I said, if you want to come in and debate it, please, 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 the link is available. Just tell me where to send it. Beep, one copy paste, boom, it's in your mailbox, and you can come in here and complain about us smoking, drinking our coffee, having a beer every now and then. But for God's sake, at least be ready to debate on the merits, because if you can't, you're just going to look stupid.
Okay. I mean, if you want to make fun of me because I smoke a cigarette, or if you want to make fun of me because I may forget a train of thought or something, go for it. I don't really give a shit.
Okay.
But
that's our private joke with Mike. That's how Michael's got a new thought when he goes, okay.
If you want to debate and have a true and honest and open dialogue, then I'm all for that. Come on here. I'd gladly debate you, gladly talk it over with you. Who knows? You may change my mind.
See, I know what you're referring to, and most people don't know. It's the Young Turks who were upset with me because I smoke, and you too, Mike. But they pointed out me. The worst thing they could say about me is I smoke a cigarette. And to you, Mike, they said, it takes so long to give that answer. Yeah, but notice they won't actually show up. They won't actually debate the issue.
Oh, hell no.
No, they'll just fun at us because they don't have the substance. And just to mention Agent Black, I know the reason why they try and associate things that they don't like with the very worst things they can imagine is because their ideas will not compete on an even playing field, like the Young Turks. They're going to try and insult us. They're going to attack us personally because their position does not stand up to scrutiny when someone who knows the issues is there in front of them. They have to demonize or embarrass as much as they can to deflect and distract from the fact that they have no substance and all they're doing is trying to take away control. That's why they do these things.
They're literally trying to bully us into submission.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've also got tremendous broadcast budgets. They've got a team of writers. they've got editors, they've got producers, they've got God knows
Research teams.
research team. How many of the little college kids came in to learn about broadcasting and now working as interns? Over here, what do you got? There's usually four of us. You got four guys here who have day jobs, work our asses off to the friggin' bone, but we pay attention to what's going on. But at least when we do read what we read stuff that matters, and we don't base our opinion based on emotion. We base our opinions based on fact.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the causality of the decisions that are made, good or bad, and we can come to a conclusion on them, and then call it what it is. And speaking of people that we'd love to come on and have explain a position, Tulsi, I'm going to send you a link to the show. I'd love for you to come on.
Oh, we'd love to have Tulsi Gabbard on.
I have been probably Tulsi Gabbard's biggest critic for years and years and years, because of her stance on the Second Amendment, and then what I'm going to call the blatant hypocrisy of her using an AR-15 last week in a tweet as she competed in a firearms competition. I would like for her to come on and explain how that. If you have a legitimate epiphany, or you've evolved enough to understand why it's important, please, I would love for you to come on. Let me give you the chance to explain yourself, because nobody's asked you yet. I think I'm the only voice that's really been knocking on your Twitter every day going, hey, remember you said this last year? Come on, we would love that. And we're going to be very cordial. We'll be very sweet. We'll be very kind, but we're going to be tough. But we'd love for you to have to come on and explain yourself. You can have the whole hour all to yourself. We don't care. Convince us. And on the flip side of the argument, to our right-leaning brethren and sistren who are out there that are all of a sudden swooning because the lovely young lady from Hawaii has said that she's leaving the Democrat Party, I will say to you what I said before. Just because the girl that you like is getting a divorce doesn't mean she's into you. She might be getting a divorce for reasons that you don't know. It doesn't mean that she's going to be going out to dinner with you anytime soon. So before you go chasing that opportunity down, at least get to know why. So, take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't mean she's going to be the next Ronald Reagan. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, has more to do with the fact that the Democrats already decided to cut off her funding for her next election. That has a lot to do.
I've called out Dan Crenshaw for positions that he's.
Dan Crenshaw is easy to call out. He's a buffoon.
Okay. I don't care what party you're from. If I don't agree with your position, or if I think it is outside the authority that your office holds, I'm going to call you to account for it. Okay. And you're more than welcome to come on here at any time and explain your position, explain your side. I had a congressional candidate. Michael was there. In fact, this is the very interview the Young Turks is talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I challenged him on his position. I said, where would you have the authority to do that? And he could not answer me.
Yeah. And that was a whole big controversy, but it was the right thing to ask. It was because I remember it was a question I brought up and then you followed up on.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's about making it so that that even naturalized immigrants were not going to be allowed to vote.
Well, listen, to be honestly fair about that whole thing, the nail was in that coffin before you asked that question.
No, yeah.
It was.
That's not something that's going anywhere, anyplace. If anything, you probably did the voters a tremendous service by, asking that question and getting it out there. Because look, here's the thing. We've got way too many lunatics on both sides of the aisle.
Exactly.
And it's far too late once the hand is on that Bible and they go like this and go, "Why I swear to uphold the Constitution," it's too late. It's usually too late to do anything about it. They're going to be there forever, and we'll never get rid of them. It's good to knock them out of the box beforehand and let a credible, reliable person, whether it's left or right, let somebody honest come in and at least try to debate for that position, rather than somebody whose worldview is so skewed and short-sighted, that they walk face first into the door every day.
Well, that's why we always say you have to make sure the people we're electing are efficient and effective and that they have been properly vetted. We have to ask. The media doesn't want to ask questions. And I will point out the easiest example of that. When was the last time you heard anyone in the major media ask Joe Biden or anyone in the Biden administration what's happening to the somewhere between 200 and 5,000 Americans that remain in Afghanistan more than a year to this day? Which I have asked on the record, I have asked in tweets, I have sent out emails, I have done it on my program every week since September 1st, 2021. And there is no answer from the government. These are the questions that we need to ask and we need to have answered, because the impact on each and every one of us is absolutely devastating. Because the next time we leave someone in another country, like the Ukraine, where we have done that to 10,000 people now, or the 200 people in China, what is the next country we're going to leave someone where you or someone you love may be? We need to answer this. We need to ask questions. We need to demand answers, because that is our right. I truly believe that.
Yeah, and we also have to be able to make sure that when we do ask these questions, that one of the things people don't realize is that when you do ask prescient questions and you ask for truth and you ask for honesty, the first thing that happens after they lie to you is that they threaten you.
Yeah.
And you can see that no further just what happened with Fetterman in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
The reporter from NBC said that you seem to have a little bit of trouble with your small talk. Now, Fetterman, if you don't know, he's running for Senate to fulfill the seat that's being vacated by Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania. Fetterman, who's a self-described communist, he looks like he belongs on some biker gang shirt or something like that. The guy recently had a stroke. Mm-hmm. And since he's been having a lot of times with his cognitive abilities, his speech abilities, and all the rest of it, and we sincerely wish that, number one, the stroke didn't happen, but since it did, we do wish that he makes a full and complete recovery, because I don't like picking fights with somebody who can't defend themselves properly. And in his current state, he can't. He can't articulate answers. He can't articulate responses. He's having problems understanding questions. And that in and of itself, as horrible as it sounds, is kind of a disqualifier from being able to hold office, because if you don't have the cognitive ability to understand what it is that you're reading and voting on, you have to allow the 11 million people in your state, or however many people are in the state of Pennsylvania right now, to have a better choice, whether it's conservative, liberal, centrist, whatever it is. But that being said, when a reporter asks that person about the elephant in the room, and the candidate's wife says something needs to happen to this reporter, they need to be held accountable, that's a tremendous chilling effect on media. And when you have somebody who's actually willing to ask a very important question, and the first thing that they're done is they're threatened. Listen, Fetterman, I'm going to ask you the same question, dude. What's going on? What's going to do to do my crit? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? I'll do that impersonation for you. If you're going to threaten me, it's not going to work. I've been threatened by bigger and better. But if you can't answer the question, you can't hold the office. And you got to be honest about that.
Well, the fact is, And I've seen this argument, and they've tried to deflect the argument. They've tried to change the argument to, oh, well, he's the same as he. Are you saying that if he had glasses that he couldn't do the job, or if he had a hearing aid he can't do the job? It's no, he's not visually impaired. He's not hearing impaired, which can be corrected by science and device. He is mentally impaired by medical doctor diagnosis. It is a fact. It is a mental impairment. He cannot cognitively have a conversation. Therefore, he cannot go to Congress and represent people effectively. That is a fact. It is not an opinion. It is not subjective. It's not personal. It is a medical diagnosis. He cannot do the job amongst his peers if he were to be elected. 13 million people are denied their rights because of that. He should not be in the race.
And look, and not only a matter of him being able to do the job with his peers, part of the responsibility of a senator or a representative is to meet with your constituents, to have town halls, to be able to meet with the people in your office, to be able to understand the things that are important to them. And if you don't have the ability to understand your constituents, how are you going to have the ability to represent your constituents?
Can't.
You know, it would be, listen, this would be the same thing as if you'd wanted to send me into some major city in Japan and have me represent the people that are there. How the hell am I going to possibly do it if I don't understand the language? I don't understand the culture. I don't understand the tradition. I don't understand any of that. It's the same level of impairment that you have as if it's literally that different. It's literally that different to say, well, he'll have as much difficulty understanding his ideology as a constituency as I would understanding those of a foreign nation.
Yeah.
I just don't have a frame of reference. But at least if I was in Japan, I might be able to have somebody who explain it to me and put it into English that I would be able to understand, to be able to have a relatable, situation.
But that at least would be a different argument because it's not your cognitive ability.
Right. It gets lost in translation. Whereas him, it's a cognitive issue.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of, well, how do you explain the color blue to somebody who can't see?
You can't.
You can't.
And that's exactly where he is, which means he is not qualified by definition. This should not be a race. And it's embarrassing. And it tells you this is about power. The Democrats are using sympathy and people's empathy to try and go, well, he's the underdog. They're attacking him. They're picking on him. No, he is not qualified. By definition, he is unqualified and should not be in the race.
He's no longer competent.
No, that's it. He's not competent. Put up another Democrat. Put up anyone. But don't let him run. If he wants to come, if he heals and he's cognitive in 2024, let him run then. I don't mind.
And to continue to run him is political malpractice.
Yes. It is an abuse of power. It is literally nullifying the voices of 13 million people. And people need to recognize that. It isn't about, oh, I feel bad for him. I don't care if you feel bad for him. Honestly, it's not about our feelings. It's about, is he effective and efficient? Can he do the job? The answer is no. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. That's the fact.
And you want to know what the whole scariest thing of that whole situation is? He's running for Pat Toomey's seat, which is going to be vacated.
Yeah. And
he's running against a conservative for all intents and purposes.
Mostly.
And the race, according to the polls, if you can believe them, is tied.
Yeah.
Within striking distance of one another. How bad of a senator was Pat Toomey that he should be vacating a seat, and the Republican vying to take over the seat isn't walking away with 80% of the vote? How bad of a senator is Pat Toomey that he left such a horrible taste in the mouth of Pennsylvanians that they would want to try and elect a a self-described communist who has, from what I understand, a very vulgar tattoo across the back of his neck, which is the reason why he wears those sweatshirts.
Oh,
You know,
no, that's not why. He has a medical issue. He has a tumor. Well, the current inside baseball is he's not worried about the tattoo being seen because he could wear a regular collared shirt and hide it. It's because he has a growth on his neck, and it is so large, and it again goes to his health. That's why he wears the sweatshirts that cover up all of his everything he wears covers his entire neck because there's a growth right about here.
Well, look, I don't care if the guy looks like Quasimodo. If he knows what he's doing and he does a good job, then God bless him. Let him do his job. But if it's a matter of it being health concerns or whatever, then, look, Pennsylvania's got to look a little deeper inside and say, I don't know if just ideologically, do you really want a friggin' communist? Look at it's bad enough you got Count Dracula as your friggin' governor over there with that Bob Murphy guy. You really want to have this guy running the place?
There's a big surge in communism right now here in the United States, just like there was back in the late 30s through the 40s and early 50s.
You know, but I don't get it, because Pennsylvania, with the shutdown of the Keystone Pipeline, Pennsylvania was one of the biggest losers of manufacturing jobs, of oil refinery jobs, of production jobs. They probably lost 300,000 jobs in Pennsylvania alone because of the same principles that Fetterman is running on, the same principles that Murphy's runs on. And yet the people in Pennsylvania are literally split 50-50 right now on which way to go.
There's a reason why.
No, it's actually, the problem is worse than you think. John Fetterman has said directly when he was healthy that he would free convicted, these are felons, convicted murderers, mass murderers, and he would set them free from prison. Convicted. These are not people we have a question with. These are people who've admitted to committing mass murders, and he will release them back into the public because of his position on prison reform, jail reform, social justice. And this is his position. So it's not even if people don't want to think about math and the economy. We are currently across this nation screaming that we need to deal with crime. And the answer isn't revisioning or reimagining the police. And he is a candidate who is directly saying, I will release confirmed and self-admitted mass murderers into the community. And they're going, it's kind of 50-50. I don't know. That terrifies me. I don't understand that.
Well, I want to go back to what Frank was saying, okay, with 300,000 jobs lost. Okay, those 300,000 jobs that were lost ended up being 300,000 people that became dependent upon government.
Yeah.
And if you look throughout Pennsylvania's history, okay, you had shutdowns of steel plants, you've had shutdown of coal plants, and slowly Pennsylvania has been devolving into a state where the populace is primarily government dependent.
Like Maryland or Illinois.
And when you've got a populace that is government dependent, they tend to push for more socialistic and communistic views.
New York, California. Yep. That's the pattern. Yeah.
Well, then listen, we got to start having some senators and start introducing bills that says that we have to start picking up Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and all of our historical sites out of Pennsylvania and put them somewhere where they're friggin' respected, because those sites do not represent the kind of governance that the people in Pennsylvania are voting for. And they shouldn't. They should not have those. They should not have those landmarks there if they can't respect them.
But we're seeing it across. We're seeing it across the nation. Okay, we're actually starting to see it in the Farm Belt. it's starting to get worse with a lot of the socialism and communistic viewpoints
Hey,
because
I know
farmers have
plenty.
been forced out. I mean, starting with the farming crisis in the 80s.
Look, I know a lot. I know a lot of farmers that I've had disagreements with because they're more than happy to take those subsidies. They're more than happy to watch half their crops burn because they don't want to
Right.
have to, be able to have the market adjust the price for the goods that they produce, and rather sit on dormant acreage and not produce food because the government said it's better to have the prices inflated. It's better to not be the breadbasket of the world. And you have a lot of farmers that have been fighting against that, and they're at war with one another over the subsidies and government control of our food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sickening. It's sickening when you look at how friggin' big this government is, how the tentacles of government. You remember that show Deadliest Catch?
Yeah.
All right. When Bush administration was in and they had the government shutdown, I was watching an episode of Deadliest Catch where the Fisheries Bureau was shut down as part of the government shutdown. And because the Fisheries Bureau was shut down, these guys couldn't get their permits to go out crabbing. And these guys are going out into the Bering Sea. They're going out to the Bering Sea to go crabbing. And I'm thinking to myself, the one captain, he goes, I will never vote for this administration again because of this government shutdown. They tied my hands, they closed my business, they do that. And I think to myself, are the tentacles of government that friggin' long that they've even reached into the Bering Sea to tell you how many fucking crab you can get?
Yeah.
And you see, at that point, how big is government that everything that you do is going to be reliant on whether or not some bureaucrat gives you the red light or green light? And when it gets that big, it's got to be time to rein it in. And I'm like, instead of complaining that you've got a government shutdown preventing you from going fishing, complain that your government is too big to tell you that you can't go fishing.
And here's the thing. I actually got into a discussion about this earlier. Back when Alexander Hamilton was pushing for the national bank, and he recoined or redefined the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution. And then the Supreme Court upheld that redefinition. Okay. Essentially, when the Constitution was drafted, necessary proper meant it had to be an absolute requirement in order to carry out the powers defined underneath Article 1, Section 8, or any of the other powers defined in the Constitution. That was perverted because the national bank made it a little easier for Congress to be able to coin money. They didn't need a national bank in order to be able to coin currency or coin money. But it made it easier for them to distribute that coin money by having a national bank, which in turn led to the Federal Reserve. Well, using the new definition, now necessary and proper means, will it make performing a certain power easier for the federal government, which has in turn led to the interstate commerce clause being perverted and causing a lot of intrastate commerce to being regulated by the federal government, because by regulating intrastate commerce, it made it easier for them to regulate interstate commerce.
Right. But
Okay. And we've seen this perverted definition twisted so that it allows government to expand well beyond its original authority.
And that all has to do with the one word regulate.
yeah. And we see that constantly. The fact is, it's not unusual or new that the government is always seeking to have more power. That's always been, every government does that.
Mhm.
The fact that it's happened slower here than anywhere else is a testament to the Constitution and the enactment of the Constitution, which has been eroding. And God help us, it's been eroding faster in the last 10 years than it's ever been eroding
yeah.
before. We are seeing a landslide movement towards an authoritarian style of government that is more social and socialistic and communistic in its nature. I am terrified of this. And again, I understand, and Agent Black's mentioning there are roughly 60% of this nation is receiving funding, government aid. That's 60% of the country that is in some way dependent on a ruling body that continues to provide them with services and therefore making them essentially an economic slave.
Well,
And what goes with that is all the other things they're taking away from us because of that fear. And
let's
that's
look at one thing. Okay. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on.
Mhm.
Threaten to take away Social Security.
Oh, you're out of you lose that election in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Okay. Threaten to take away Social Security. And the very first thing is anybody that's drawing Social Security, you've lost their vote.
I know.
Okay. So that means anybody over 65, guaranteed you will not have their vote.
And then you got the I'm sitting
Okay. And
here.
then anybody that's on SSI, which are people under 65 that are incapacitated in one form or another, you've lost their vote.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well,
You threaten Social Security, and then on top of it, you start looking at the majority of people, working people that pay into Social Security. Okay, they're real leery of voting for you.
well, that's right. And then you got
and here it is. It's a government program that never should have been instituted to begin with, but
Bankrupt.
twisted the meanings of various clauses within the Constitution in order to give themselves the authority to steal from us and put this money into an account that they constantly rape, that is becoming insolvent.
It already is
And it's a
insolvent.
Ponzi scheme to begin with.
Yes.
And we are up in arms because they're going to take away our Social Security.
and then what?
And we've had
happens-
this discussion before too, early on when we started this. Okay, if I were to take the same money that I'm putting, that's being robbed from my paycheck every week to go into Social Security, and I invested it into my own investment accounts,
You'd make more money.
I would end up having well over 10 times the amount of money when I was ready to retire.
Yeah.
Well, and now you have these people that are out there pushing for the universal basic income.
Oh God.
Mhm.
All right, you have this one woman out there, Nina Turner. She's a former senator from Ohio.
Andrew
Right.
Yang and AOC also support this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, her latest tweet a little
Yeah, the
while
whole
ago
squad
was,
does.
yeah, her latest tweet a couple hours ago was a $2,000 monthly reoccurring check is still good policy. It's still with the affordability crisis. And I think to myself, what a schmuck. But no, because and I just hear me out. Hear me out on this. The woman's a schmuck. Because okay, you want to have the federal government issue $2,000 checks to every American citizen. All right, number one, where's the money come from?
That's
Okay.
my first question.
All right, and here's the other question that I had. What happens when the American dairy farmer, because they have a union, the American Dairy Farmers Association, that they all go and they do what their thing. What happens when they all get together at their annual meeting and go, hey, Billy Bob, you see everybody getting that check for $2,000 a month? Yeah. Well, guess what a gallon of milk costs as of next week? $2,000. And they decide that they're going to arbitrarily raise the price, cut production, and say, that's it. and raise the price. What happens when all the prices go up? Are they going to be like, oh, well, we need $4,000 a month now? We need $8,000 a month now. This is the same woman who, the big fight for 15, she's out there with a fight for 25. I'm like, why not just make it $1,000 an hour, Nina? Why don't we just make everybody gets $1,000 an hour? How about that? And next time you have a leaking faucet in your house, and the plumber comes over and hits you with a $27,000 bill, then you can see what the hell happens. These people, they have no idea. I would like to say they don't understand, but they do. They do understand. Yeah. They know exactly what their policies are going to bring out, and that's the destruction of the economy.
Now, I want to go back to this $2,000 a month basic income.
Schmucks.
Okay. Which is unearned income. Taxed at the highest rate, 40%. 40%, 2,000.
Well, 600.
Going to be roughly $800.
Well, $800, yeah. I'm tired.
So that means for every man and woman, every adult income, okay, and I don't know if she's adding kids onto that, if everybody's in that $2,000 or what, but let's just limit that to adults. That is literally $800 for every adult being pulled out of the economy.
Well, it'll be $9,600 a year. Now, you got to remember, if they were to institute a basic income, well, the money's got to come from somewhere, and they're going to turn around and they're going to say, well, we can't just keep printing the money because that'll devalue the money. So what we're going to do is we're going to institute a corporate tax on all these major corporations and pull the money from them, and it'll be a direct wealth transfer from the corporations to the individual. So they take $9,600 from General Electric for every single American, $9,600 from General Motors, $9,600 from Dodge, Chrysler Corporation, whatever they do, and they take that $2,000 a month directly from these companies, because now it doesn't come from the federal coffers, from the taxpayer dollar. It comes from the corporations. They give it to the people. They take back $9,600 a year, and they put it back into the federal government. Use the $9,600 to make government even bigger, and then the government can turn around and say, "See, we didn't hurt the economy. We just took from the wealthy and redistributed to the poor, and then took $9,600 for every American and instituted more social programs so that we could reinforce Social Security and SSDI and all the rest of these other social programs. And the federal government isn't on the hook for that money because we're taking it from the corporations." But not realizing that the prices of everything goes through the roof, and you're paying $4,000 for a stick of butter.
Actually, there's a correction to what you're saying, Frank, because according to Andrew Yang, according to AOC and the squad, even Bernie Sanders, they're not going to put a tax. They're just going to print the money. That is actually an economic theory right now being taught in colleges, that you will just print the money because it will never be called. No one's ever going to ask for it. It doesn't matter. Literally, they have said this on national TV. They have admitted that they're just going to print money endlessly.
Oh, yeah. Well, they all admit that they'll be dead. Their grandchildren will be dead before that bill ever comes due. And by the time the bill comes due, the country will be dead, and we'll all be under the power of the one.
No, Frank, you're not understanding.
They don't believe it's ever going to come due. They just said
it will never come due, because if it ever comes due, print more money.
That's their answer. Just always print the money, because it will never come due and it doesn't matter. That's their answer. They're not thinking about what's going to happen to inflation or the cost of goods. And I know this because I have it on the screen right now, the actual tweet from Nina Turner. And this is her Twitter account. And so they're saying it's a good policy. She says literally $2,000 per month recurring checks are still a good policy, especially with the affordability crisis. She is out of her mind. It's not just that she wants to do the 2,000. Let me show you what else she's saying. And I'll go over this real quick. And surprise, surprise, by the way, folks, who does she work for? The Young Turks. This is the Young Turks, mass media, funded by corporate government, the far left. She's funded to say these things. And what's her main thing that she has pinned on her page? She wants a $25 minimum wage. Well,
Oh, and you want to know? You want to know something hysterical about Nina Turner?
What?
When she was canvassing for office,
Yeah,
she was paying her staff $15 an hour.
yeah, I know. But
so not only is she a liar and a schmuck, she's a hypocrite on top of it.
They all are. So is Bernie Sanders. He paid his people $9 an hour. He wanted a $15 minimum wage. And the fact is, according to the CBO, a $15 minimum wage, not 25, which they call a living wage usually, a $15 minimum wage will make 1.7 million Americans unemployed. There are only 1.1 million Americans who actually get minimum wage. Almost all of them are teenagers. So they're actually going to create more unemployment, and they're going to increase the cost of everything, hurting poor people disproportionately for an idea that sounds good, but is absolutely wrong. And I get this from the CBO 3 separate times in 2018, in 2020, 2020, and the most recent report this year, 2021, in June, as I recall. They've done this study. It is always going to hurt the poor. It is always going to make Americans unemployed. And you add $25 minimum wage, which will bankrupt roughly about 25% of all businesses in this nation. It will bankrupt the poor. It will hurt the middle class. It will increase inflation by roughly 7% instantly. And then you add on top of that a $2,000 a month check that is printed pure out of the air, which means inflation goes up on top of this by another roughly 7 to 12%. And you're talking about your buying power going to zero. You're talking about milk and eggs that are going to cost $10 each at least. And tell me what poor person.
Oh, and that's not per dozen, that's each.
Well,
yeah.
When a 2022 Ford F-150 pickup truck, 4x4, fully loaded, cost $91,000. Could you imagine? And a lot of that is tied to what the auto workers union get paid. The American Auto Workers Union gets a shit ton of money per hour. People don't realize just how much money that they make and why that's contributing to the cost of the vehicle. But could you imagine when everybody's making $72,000 on minimum wage? Because that's what it equates to. At $25 an hour, that's $1,000 a week, $4,000 a month, plus $2,000 a month for the minimum wage. That's $6,000 times 12, $72,000. That's minimum wage. What incentive at $72,000 for minimum wage does somebody have to be able to go to school, learn a trade, and do something they're gonna bust their back on? What do you think a construction worker is going to work for $25 an hour when the kid flipping burgers at McDonald's is making $25 an hour?
You're missing the point, Frank. It's $72,000. If minimum wage becomes $72,000, then to buy everything goes up by more than that amount.
Oh, I'm not missing that point at all, because I'm saying is, if I have a skill, okay, I have a skilled trade. Right. I do construction, I do cabinetry. The work that I do, I can put my own price on, and whatever I charge based on my clientele. Right. But if I'm seeing an unskilled laborer who is whatever the most menial, mindless chore job that you could possibly imagine doing, and that guy is making $72,000 an hour. Well, Jesus Christ, I've got 10 times the amount of skill as that person. I should be making $720,000 a year instead of $72,000. Exactly. So now all you've done is taken the decimal point and say, okay, well, instead of a guy making $10,000 a year and somebody with 10 times as much skill making $100,000 a year, all you've done is move the decimal point over.
Yep. That's
So
it.
instead of the milk costing you $2.89 a gallon, now it will cost you $28.90 a gallon. You move the decimal point over. Ralph Cramden, a bus driver from Brooklyn, made $52 a week. $52 a week when the Honeymooners show was on television. 30 years later, moved the decimal point over one. The bus driver was making $520 a week. It's all we're doing is moving the decimal point. They don't understand that these numbers don't mean anything. If you want to make it mean something, move decimal point back the opposite direction, and prices would have to adjust to fall. Because if everybody's making 10% of what it is, then everything comes down accordingly. Everything goes up accordingly, it goes down accordingly. They don't understand that the numbers don't mean anything. The market is going to adjust based on what people are making and what people are paying.
Here's one thing that I want to point out. First off, raising the minimum wage has never brought anybody out of poverty.
Nope.
Never.
Not once.
Okay. The only thing that's happened when the minimum wage is raised is the number of people that are impoverished increases.
Yeah.
Because the wages above that minimum wage never go up.
Yeah.
Or very rarely go up, and they don't go up near as much as the increase in minimum wage will.
Well, union wages will go up because union wages are always tied to the
minimum wage. They
minimum
still will not
wage.
go up by the same percentage as what the increase in the minimum wage.
No. So here's you got a little bit of mistake in there. There were certain unions have it built into their contract that dependent upon the minimum wage, the wage of the union worker has to go up by a percentage commensurate with that of the percentage that goes up in the minimum wage. So say minimum wage goes up 10%. The wage of the union worker is going to go up 12%. That's how they have it written into their contract. So the minimum that the union worker gets paid for, like say the UAW, goes up 12% for the 10% that minimum wage goes up. But every single person who's in the next pay scale going up, their rate goes up incrementally. Why do you think unions are always in support of raising the minimum wage? Because their rates go up incrementally in a larger percentile based on the percentile that it goes up according to minimum wage. So if minimum wage is $10 an hour, and say the guy at the union, he's making 25, that wage goes up $11 an hour to $11 an hour. The union worker is now making $27.50. The guy above him who was making $32.50 is now making $37. The guy above him who was making $42 is now making $49. It goes up percentage wise. It's like reoccurring debt. It goes up and up and up.
But
that's still not going to help a vast majority of Americans.
No, it's not, because as those wages in the unions go up, the price of the products that they produce go up. That's why car prices have more than tripled in the last 20 years when the prices of other commodities have not. Because the industries that are controlled by union wages, they go up at a faster rate.
Let me finish. Okay. Only 9% of Americans have union jobs.
Yes, but Mike, let me add something.
So the majority of Americans will not be impacted by that, other than the increase in prices.
Which 100% of Americans get impacted by that.
But wait a minute. Here's the thing that you have to add into this, because there's another part of that's being left out. It is part and parcel of these plans by Nina Turner, by AOC, by the Squad, Bernie Sanders, that is in this element of increasing the cost. You're right, Frank. The unions do have that in there. And it is part and parcel that for these plans, for these universal basic incomes, you have to unionize. It is part and parcel that they demand that you have more unions to put people into. Again, and this still collapses the entire economy, because still the overwhelming number of people aren't in a union and will not benefit from this. So you're right. And they have that built in, which is why they get the union support. And I'll give you an example. People can go to the Green New Deal, by or the new Green New Deal, that's it, by AOC, and it is in there as part of its description that they have to increase the income and you have to unionize, that it's doing both things at the same time. When you listen to Nina Turner and the Young Turks, when they talk about this, they make it simultaneous that you have to be in a union and that they have to do this to take the full benefit. But what they're leaving out is, even if you were to have 50% of the nation in there, as Mike has mentioned, you're still going to see most people are going to be negatively impacted. You're still going to see the value of the dollar devalued, that they're going to basically inflate the cost to turn us into a banana republic. And it is still, even under that scenario, more counterproductive for the entire nation. But that's the part that they leave out. They make it sound very attractive. Well, the unions, you're a union worker, you're going to be fine. Everyone has to be a union worker. Therefore, everyone is under a category which is now subservient to the elected officials who are pandering to those unions. It's a neat way of packaging people into a simple category that is now under the demand of whatever political power is in charge.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, let's say we raise the minimum wage up to $25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The only wages, with the exception of union contracts that have this built in, the only wages that are going to increase to $25 an hour are anybody that's actually below $25 an hour. Wages that are above $25 an hour are going to more than likely stay there. Okay, with the exception of 9% of union jobs.
Pretty much. We've already seen that happen in the union.
So we're talking that the vast majority of Americans are not going to see that. Okay, so literally what we've done is we've moved the poverty line from, let's say, $7 an hour up to $25 an hour. Now, okay, and we now have a lot more Americans that are making minimum wage than we did in the past prior to this. Okay, because we've now added all those jobs that were making below $25 an hour, that were making above minimum wage but below $25 an hour, that are now minimum wage jobs.
Yes, and you're also going to see a growth. To be fair, Frank is right. There would still be more unions, more union workers, which categorizes those people. That now puts them under the category, and every union takes the money from their employees to put to a political candidate who they're going to pander to increase the wages in the future of those union employees. It is an insidious trap. It takes away individuals' ability to make money. It takes away your forward mobility. It essentially creates a class system like we see in India and many other nations that are economically trapped at whatever level they're in. It stops the forward mobility of American citizens to be able to dictate to themselves, and it increases the power of the elected elites in being able to control people. It is absolutely one of the worst ideas, both the universal basic income and the minimum wage. And I've spoken about this in many colleges. There is zero benefit to the nation to do this. It is one of the easiest ways to turn us into a dictatorship and a banana republic, both at the same time.
Yeah, and then
raising minimum wage is nothing but destructive.
Right, and then think about the guys who are out there making $26 an hour for a high-skilled job. You know, somebody who's making a
Guess
decent
what?
amount.
After that minimum wage is raised to $25 an hour, they're still going to be making $26 an hour.
Right, and you know what's going to happen with those guys? He's going to say, I'm standing out here on the middle of this roof when it's 95 degrees outside in the sun putting shingles down. I could be in a nice air-conditioned friggin' restaurant someplace cleaning tables for the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to be doing that roofing anymore. You're going to start seeing all those jobs that are just above that threshold. So people are going to start walking off the job saying, I am no longer going to risk my life, my health for what was a decent paycheck last week when I could do a low skilled job for $40 for 40 hours a week and do a job that doesn't require any skill at all, and I'll do that job instead. Now you're going to start having tremendous labor shortages in the workforce for people who are just making above it. The guy working $27 an hour as a mechanic or doing whatever he's doing, he's going to say, "Screw this! Why am I working myself to the bone when I could do something a little more simple and not kill myself? I'll take the $40 a week hit. I'll take the $40 a week hit if it means that I can just work the 40 hours and never break a sweat."
And
Now that's not to say minimum. No, listen, I know a lot of people working minimum wage jobs work their asses off.
Mhm.
They work their asses off. It's hard. It might not be skilled labor, but it's hard labor. But there are certain jobs that are in that $25 to $30 an hour range right now that are high skill, high risk jobs that people will turn around and say, you know what? It's not worth it for me to invest my time, my skill, my labor, and my health in this job making $27 an hour if I can go wash dishes for 25.
And Frank, you're right. It is happening, and everywhere that they have done this to any degree, in every state, in Oregon, Washington, Colorado, New York City, and New York State, in every example where they have done this, we have seen exactly what you're talking about. We have seen people walk off the job to switch over into these lower jobs. We have seen people, hell, we haven't even taken into account the fact that because because the income is going up, these people on the minimum wage, they actually don't qualify for most of the government aid, so they don't even work as much as they used to work because they cut their hours to still get the government aid that they were getting. And here's the worst part of it: what's happening to the infrastructure and the private business in every one of these cities and states? They've all fallen. We've seen in every single example that we have seen somewhere between 20 to 30% of a fall of a depletion of the small businesses. And we've seen that the infrastructure in those states and cities have taken a hit. So you're absolutely right. It's just amazing that, and the information is out there. People just don't know, and they're not asking a question because
Right.
no one's concerned about the consequence. They
Right.
care about the headline.
And when those minimum wage prices do go up and people start walking off their jobs because they're going to say, I'm not going to break my back to make 50 cents more an hour than the kid flipping burgers at McDonald's. And they say, well, you know what? Listen, if you want to keep me at the job, instead of $27 an hour, you're going to have to pay me 54 because the price of everything is going to go up around me because everybody's making a higher minimum wage, which is going to drive the prices up, which means you have to drive my price up in order for me to retain this job. That guy gets a raise, then the price of his goods and service goes up, and the people making minimum wage are still in the same fucking boat they were, because now instead of paying $2.50 a gallon for a milk, they're paying $7.50 for a gallon of milk instead. The rent is going to wind up tripling. And guess what? The guy who's running the show, the guy who's making $1 billion a year, he still don't give a shit because his billion is still worth more than everybody else's 72,000.
Yep, you got it right.
And the funny thing on all this is the only thing that's changed is the number of people that are making minimum wage.
Yeah. And that's what the CBO has found 3 times in a row every time it comes up.
Well, with that, I'm going to say goodnight, guys, because I'm standing outside with my 3 lovely dogs. For those of you who haven't met my dogs, let me introduce. That's JC. That's my border collie. That's Jake running away from the cabinet. He's my white wolf, and that's Charlie running away. He's my Australian Shepherd. And I have 6 cats in the kitchen waiting for me right now because 11 o'clock is not the time when they get their treats. So, yeah, I don't know if I have the cats well trained or they have me well trained. I don't quite know yet. But
it's cats.
You don't train cats.
Yeah, I know.
Cats train you.
Yeah, well, I think with cats, you just feed them enough money. You feed them enough food so they don't turn on you.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. But on behalf of me and my dogs, I'm going to say goodnight. Everybody who's been watching tonight, thank you. We love you guys. Jen, I will be getting in touch with you about trying to help you get situated with your firearm purchase. But until then, I'm going to bid you guys farewell. Be safe, shoot straight. Watch November 1st. Big day. We'll inform you about that next week. Have you guys have a good night.
Have a great night, Frank.
Yeah, it's really, I've done a lot of details and information about small business and excuse me, the
Well, I I
universal.
I just want to kind of wrap this episode
Sure.
up
Mhm.
with one thing that we kind of pointed out throughout this episode. The more government increases, the worse the nation gets.
Every single time. Every single
Okay,
time.
plain and simple.
Mhm.
And the thing is, okay, when we increase the number of government employees, we pull billions of dollars out of our economy that's literally lost. It's caught in a perpetual loop. Okay, when we use government to force market changes, it ends up hurting the very people that it's supposed to help.
Mhm.
Okay, and actually makes it worse for everybody else. It's we government 99.99999% of the time is never the answer.
Yes.
Except we have over 99% of our people, of our populace, asking for government to fix the problems.
Well, not even
And it's
fix
the
it.
problems that government's created.
Yeah. Not even to fix it, just to, and again, I hate this term, do something. The worst thing. Just do something. The worst
Okay.
thing you can do government.
And these problems are literally problems that have been created and perpetrated by the government.
Yep.
And I'm not anti-government. I'm not.
No, man.
Okay, because there are certain areas where we need government. We need government for international relations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are places where we need government. And if we look at the Constitution, the United States Constitution, we can see exactly where we need a national government. And anything beyond that scope, government is a hindrance. Okay, it is destructive. And if you
Individual
don't
liberty and
think it
freedom.
is, we can show you throughout history where government has exceeded its authority and it has actually created more problems than it solved.
Yeah, consistently. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Frank alluded to it a little bit. Okay. And I want to remind everybody, we talked about it last week. We touched on it a little bit the week before that. Come November 1st, we are starting up a new membership website on the Liberty First Foundation website. Okay. You can find that at l1f.us. This new membership is going to be paid memberships, and we are going to be charging for new paid members $15 a month. This will help support and offset some of the costs that we experience in doing our research and various other things, events that we cover, and so forth. Okay. And the expenses that we have just bringing you the show and maintaining our website. Okay. All this costs quite a bit.
Yeah.
So this is helping us to defray some of those costs. However, when you sign up as a new member, the very first 250 will be eligible to win a custom Henry Golden Boy 22 rifle. Okay, this is custom engraved with the Liberty First Foundation logo, which you can see up the top upper right hand corner of our broadcast. Also, as a part of that paid membership, be you're going to be able to access some of our premium content, and we are going to be working on some courses and stuff for the future. Okay, along with some other benefits. We're going to have various giveaways. They're going to be members only giveaways. We're also going to have exclusive deals with various manufacturers that are going to be only available to our members. So I want to remind you again, November 1st is when we're launching our 2023 membership drive. And I will encourage everybody to become a member. One of the biggest ways that you can also help support us is by liking, sharing, and subscribing to not only our live broadcast, but our Facebook page, and join our Facebook group. You can also find us on Twitter and on YouTube. On YouTube, you can find us under the Liberty First Foundation and the L1F Range Report. Okay, there we have various video content that is available to everybody. Other than that, I want to say thank you to Michael Vasquez and give him a chance to let you know how you can find out more about him and how you can watch him on his No Soundbites Allowed.
Well, as always, every Friday, I'm always here with you guys. Normally, I'm here at 9 o'clock on the dot, but today I was a little bit late. Sorry for that. But otherwise, besides being here with the Liberty First Foundation, helping with many things behind the scenes, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do a live stream where anyone in the world can comment. You can even call in as well as leave comments on the live stream. Everyone gets to see it, where we talk about the issues that affect everyone, going across international policy all the way down to the local races. We try and cover a little bit of everything. And most of all, and the most important part is, it's about the First Amendment. We listen to what you have to say, and we talk about what you have to say. So I always look forward to people seeing that. And you can find me on all social media under No Soundbites Allowed.
Thank you, Michael. One other thing, I do want to take this last little bit, and I want to thank everybody that's watched and participated in this broadcast. We do encourage anybody that's watching our broadcast or live stream to comment, let your voice be heard. Mm-hmm. Okay. We try to post anything that's relevant to our discussion up on the screen. And we also try to answer any questions that are put forth to us. We do encourage people to challenge us on our positions. Okay. We do a lot of research, but we can't find everything. And we definitely do not know everything. In fact, Jan Raines last week proved to us we don't have the information all the time.
Yeah.
Because there's something that Jan Raines brought up last week that neither one of us knew about. Yep. Okay. And it's actually something that's very important.
Yeah. Big news.
So again, okay, we do this for you guys, but we also urge you guys to participate and to help us out. Yep. Okay. And you can help us out, like I said, in a lot of ways. You can either become a member when we do our membership drive starting November 1st, or you can help us share our message out there. Okay. Another way that you can help us, and I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, is challenge us on our positions. Okay. Because just because we may hold a certain position or another position doesn't mean that we necessarily are right, and doesn't mean that we aren't open-minded enough to change our position given proper evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I want to say thank you, and I want to say good night. Have a great week, and we'll see you here next week on Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.